There is a particular strength in a woman who no longer bends herself to fit into expectations, and it is this strength that often unsettles men who are not ready to face their own insecurities. Her authenticity, her refusal to minimize her voice or dilute her essence, becomes a mirror. In that mirror, some men see not her flaws but their own. What emerges is projection. They place their hidden fears, inadequacies, and unresolved doubts onto her presence. Instead of admiring her wholeness, they retreat, unable to endure the reflection of their shadow. What appears as disinterest is often fear disguised as distance. Carl Jung described the shadow as the unconscious reservoir of traits we deny in ourselves. For men, a strong woman often awakens this shadow, forcing them to confront qualities they have not integrated: vulnerability, inadequacy, or dependence on control. When a woman refuses to submit, he is faced with the realization that dominance cannot mask insecurity. This confrontation with his shadow can trigger discomfort so intense that withdrawal feels safer than growth. Thus, her strength does not repel him because it is undesirable, but because it exposes what he has not yet faced within himself. The psychological impact of this dynamic is profound. A woman who stands firm, who does not chase after attention, destabilizes a man accustomed to validation through compliance. Her independence removes the illusion that he is needed for her wholeness. To an insecure psyche, this feels threatening. Instead of recognizing her presence as an invitation to growth, he perceives it as a challenge to his identity. Retreat becomes his way of protecting himself from the discomfort of inadequacy, even if it costs him the relationship. Daily life offers countless examples of this retreat. A woman speaks her mind clearly and calmly, and instead of meeting her in dialogue, he grows silent and distant. Another asserts her boundaries with dignity, and he interprets it as rejection rather than self-respect. Another celebrates her own achievements without diminishing his, yet he feels diminished nonetheless. In each case, her authenticity reveals his fragility. His withdrawal is not proof of her failure, but evidence of his unreadiness. This is why understanding projection is so important. When he retreats, it is rarely because her strength is unattractive. More often, it is because her presence forces him to see parts of himself he is not ready to integrate. Her refusal to bend shines light on his shadow, and in that light he feels exposed. His distancing, then, reveals not lack of desire but lack of maturity. Jungian psychology reframes this moment as a test. The strong woman becomes a mirror, showing whether a man will confront his shadow or hide from it. If he chooses retreat, it is not her loss, but his. She has not diminished herself, and therefore she has preserved her dignity. Her strength functions as a natural filter, separating those who are capable of authenticity from those who cannot yet bear it. Ultimately, the woman who sustains her power learns to see his withdrawal for what it truly is: fragility, not rejection. His retreat reveals his inner conflict, not her inadequacy. And in this recognition, she discovers freedom. She no longer takes his distance as a wound, but as clarity. By standing firm, she preserves her self-respect and ensures that only those strong enough to meet her wholeness will remain. The paradox of feminine strength is that it often awakens both desire and fear in men. A woman who stands in her authenticity, who radiates confidence without arrogance, stirs something primal: attraction to her wholeness, admiration for her dignity, curiosity about her depth. Yet alongside this attraction comes intimidation. For the man who has not matured emotionally, her strength feels overwhelming. He oscillates between wanting to draw closer and feeling the need to retreat. This back and forth is not a reflection of her worth, but of his inner conflict. Carl Jung would interpret this as the confrontation between anima and shadow. The anima, the feminine aspect within a man, is drawn to her presence, sensing in her a source of completeness. But his shadow, filled with fears of inadequacy and loss of control, recoils. He desires her, yet he resists the vulnerability she demands. This tension creates the paradox. She becomes both the magnet and the mirror. He cannot deny his attraction, but he fears the self-awareness that loving her would require. The psychological effect of this paradox is exhausting for men who are unprepared. They pursue her with intensity, but once they feel her boundaries and independence, they grow distant. They return with longing, only to retreat again when faced with the reality that her presence cannot be controlled. This cycle reveals emotional immaturity, not lack of desire. A mature man recognizes that her strength is not a threat, but an invitation to grow. An immature man interprets it as a danger to his ego. Daily life offers vivid illustrations. A woman speaks with clarity about what she wants in a relationship, and he initially finds her decisiveness alluring. Yet when he realizes she will not compromise her dignity, he hesitates. Another celebrates her independence, and while he is captivated by her self-possession, he also fears he cannot meet her on equal ground. Another refuses to play small, and though he admires her courage, he retreats to avoid feeling his own limitations. These examples show that his oscillation says more about him than about her. This is why the archetype of the queen is so relevant. The queen does not dilute her presence to soothe insecurity. She stands in her authority, not to dominate, but to embody wholeness. Her very existence demands reverence, not because she asks for it, but because she refuses to abandon herself. In her presence, men are faced with a choice: either rise to meet her strength or step aside. This choice reveals who is capable of mature love and who is still bound to immaturity. The paradox is that while her strength may intimidate, it also refines attraction. Men who retreat are filtered out, leaving space only for those who see her dignity as beauty and her boundaries as security. What some interpret as rejection is actually purification. Her presence becomes a sieve through which shallow connections cannot pass. She does not lose love by standing in her strength. She attracts the kind of love that can endure it. Ultimately, the woman who embraces her strength learns that attraction mixed with fear is not rejection, but revelation. It reveals which men are inspired by her presence and which are unsettled by it. Jung would say this paradox is a natural part of individuation. The stronger she becomes, the clearer her relationships become. Desire may draw many to her, but only reverence will allow them to stay. And in that reverence, she discovers the kind of partnership worthy of her wholeness. One of the clearest ways a woman's true strength reveals itself is through the boundaries she sets. Limits are not walls meant to push others away, but the structure that makes authentic love possible. When she calmly defines what is acceptable and what is not, the truth of the relationship surfaces almost instantly. A man who values her presence leans in with respect, adjusting his actions to honor her dignity. A man who fears accountability retreats, showing that his interest was never about partnership, but about convenience. Boundaries, therefore, are not obstacles to intimacy. They are the filters that separate the immature from the prepared. Carl Jung saw individuation as the process of claiming the self fully, and boundaries are a direct expression of this process. By setting limits, a woman reclaims the parts of herself once surrendered to fear of rejection. She integrates her shadow, the part that once accepted disrespect in exchange for attention, and transforms it into self-respect. In this way, boundaries become more than relational tools. They are evidence of her inner wholeness. They communicate, "I will not abandon myself for the sake of keeping someone else." That declaration alone has the power to reshape the entire dynamic of connection. The psychological effect of boundaries is immediate. They expose intentions with clarity that words alone cannot achieve. A man who is drawn to her strength sees boundaries as an invitation to build something mature, safe, and lasting. A man who resists them reveals that he was never seeking love, but control. This instant revelation saves her from months or even years of self-doubt, because she no longer has to wonder where he stands. His reaction to her boundaries is the truth of his readiness. Everyday life offers clear examples of this reality. A woman calmly says she will not tolerate dismissive comments, and a man who values her apologizes and adjusts. Another refuses to rearrange her entire life to accommodate inconsistency, and the man unwilling to offer stability quietly drifts away. Another protects her solitude, insisting on time for herself, and the partner who is mature embraces it, while the insecure one calls it rejection. In each case, boundaries expose the nature of the bond more directly than words could. This posture reflects the archetype of the queen. The queen's dignity is not negotiable. She does not argue for her worth, she embodies it. Her boundaries are not aggressive, but sovereign. She does not threaten or demand. She simply exists in alignment with herself, and only those who honor that alignment can remain in her life. By setting limits, she transforms her relationships from arenas of negotiation into sanctuaries of respect. The paradox is that limits, often feared as barriers to love, are in truth the gateways to deeper intimacy. They repel those who are unprepared, but they draw closer those who seek authenticity. The very firmness that some interpret as coldness is what creates safety for genuine connection. A man who respects her boundaries does not see them as restrictions, but as proof of her value, and proof that she will also honor his. Ultimately, boundaries reveal not only the truth of a relationship, but also the strength of the woman who sets them. They are the clearest expression of individuation in practice. She has chosen to preserve herself, even if it means losing someone else. And in that choice, she wins something greater than fleeting attention. She gains clarity, respect, and the foundation for love that can truly last. Boundaries, then, are not the end of intimacy, but the beginning of it, because only when the self is preserved can love flourish without fear. Another moment when men retreat in the face of a woman's strength is when she refuses to beg for approval. For those accustomed to being the center of validation, her independence is unsettling. She does not chase affection, she does not plead for reassurance, and she does not barter her dignity in exchange for attention. Instead, she carries herself with quiet certainty, knowing that her value is not something to be negotiated. This refusal to seek constant approval exposes what is hidden in others. A man who is secure sees her independence as admirable, while one who is insecure interprets it as a threat to his importance. Carl Jung would explain this through projection. When a woman refuses to bend for validation, she shines a light on the shadow of a man who depends on control or superiority to feel whole. Her calm detachment forces him to face his own fear of inadequacy. Instead of celebrating her autonomy, he recoils, because her self-sufficiency reveals the gaps in his own self-respect. In this way, her independence becomes a mirror that reflects his unpreparedness. What he calls arrogance or coldness is in truth his own insecurity struggling to make sense of her strength. The psychological effect of this posture is profound. By no longer begging for attention, she frees herself from the cycle of performance. Her energy, once spent proving her worth, is now invested in preserving her peace. This calm creates a magnetism of its own, a silent authority that repels immaturity and attracts those who are ready for authenticity. Men who cannot handle this clarity often retreat, not because she is unworthy, but because they cannot rise to meet her steadiness. Daily life provides countless examples of this silent filter. A woman who does not chase after unanswered messages quickly discovers who values her presence. Another who remains composed when faced with manipulation reveals the man who expected her to fold. Another, who celebrates her achievements without waiting for applause, uncovers who is capable of admiring her without feeling diminished. Each of these moments reveals that her refusal to chase exposes what words often conceal: who is ready for partnership and who is not. This dynamic aligns closely with the archetype of the guardian. The guardian preserves what is sacred, and in this case, it is the woman's dignity. By refusing to exchange her essence for scraps of attention, she shields herself from erosion. Her silence becomes her boundary. Her independence becomes her protection. She does not explain why she values herself. She simply lives it. This living example is both disarming and magnetic because it reveals strength that does not need to announce itself. The paradox is that the very independence that drives away the insecure is what draws in the mature. By not needing constant validation, she demonstrates a wholeness that makes her more desirable. Men who are ready for depth recognize that her self-sufficiency is not a barrier to intimacy, but the very foundation of it. They are inspired, not intimidated, by her refusal to beg. Her strength does not diminish love, it refines it. Ultimately, the woman who no longer seeks approval discovers a new kind of magnetism. She does not lose connection by protecting her dignity. She gains clarity about who is capable of meeting her in truth. Jung would say that this is individuation at work, the refusal to project need outward and the choice to claim wholeness within. And in the wholeness lies her power. She does not have to compete, chase, or explain. Her silence speaks, her dignity commands, and her independence ensures that only those who honor her essence will remain. The greatest victory for a woman who sustains her strength, even when men retreat, is the preservation of her own self-respect. She learns that withdrawal is not always rejection, but often revelation, a sign that the other was not prepared for the depth she carries. By remaining firm in her authenticity, she allows distance to act as a filter rather than a wound. What might have once been taken personally now becomes clarity. His retreat speaks of his fear, not of her inadequacy. This recognition transforms loss into liberation because she no longer bends herself to be kept. Carl Jung described individuation as the process of becoming whole, and for the woman who holds her ground, this process becomes her shield. By choosing not to abandon herself for the sake of being loved, she demonstrates that wholeness is not negotiable. Her strength is not performance, but integration, a union of softness and firmness, vulnerability and dignity. To a man unprepared for such balance, it feels overwhelming. But to her, it is simply truth. She knows that the self she has claimed cannot be surrendered without cost, and so she protects it as sacred. The psychological impact of this decision is profound. No longer does she chase after those who leave, questioning her worth. Instead, she thanks the distance for revealing intentions sooner rather than later. She recognizes that the men who disappear at the first sign of her strength were never capable of sustaining intimacy. Their absence does not weaken her, it confirms the power of her boundaries. In this way, retreat becomes less a source of pain and more a compass pointing her toward those who can meet her with reverence. Daily life reflects this truth in countless ways. A woman who once begged for consistency now accepts silence as an answer. Another who once lowered her standards to keep peace now walks away with her dignity intact. Another who once viewed solitude as a punishment now experiences it as clarity. These choices may seem small, but together they reveal a profound transformation. She no longer sacrifices herself for the illusion of connection. She allows her authenticity to remain intact, even if it means standing alone. This strength aligns with the archetype of the sovereign queen. The queen does not crumble when others walk away. She remains rooted in her throne of self-possession. She does not measure her worth by who stays, but by how faithfully she honors herself. Her crown is not granted by others, it is the natural radiance of her wholeness, and it is this radiance that commands respect, whether others are able to meet it or not. The paradox is that by refusing to fear retreat, she becomes even more magnetic. Men who are whole recognize her strength as beauty and are drawn closer, while those who are not fall away without her needing to lift a finger. In protecting her authenticity, she attracts partners who do not want to diminish her but to stand beside her. Her strength becomes both shield and beacon. It guards her dignity, while guiding the right kind of love toward her. Ultimately, the woman who sustains her strength discovers that the true victory is not in keeping every man close, but in keeping herself intact. Jung would say that individuation brings clarity, and clarity brings peace. She embodies this truth. Her worth is not defined by who retreats, but by her refusal to retreat from herself. And in that unwavering presence, she becomes not only respected, but unforgettable.